So I'm very glad to have everyone, and for the newcomers joining us. So let's start another aspect of the conversation. I'm not going to start this session with an introduction. I'm going to draw a conclusion here. Throughout the previous panels that we heard very well that there was an immense pressure put on the global food security throughout supply chains, throughout some happening trends right now of key importance for consideration, some other pressure maybe from the geopolitical disruptions, issues with the supply chain, and some other aspects. So starting from this conclusion that we had for the previous sessions, it's very important and maybe urgent for us right now to navigate new opportunities and maybe navigate new aspects that should be linked to the global food security, which is the renewable energy. And that's why we are here to cover this aspect of the inclusion of the renewable energy throughout the food security and for sure throughout the agriculture. So I'm very delighted to have the esteemed panelists with me. So let me start with Wilson. Wilson, trying to build the linkage between renewable energy, food security, and maybe agriculture. So is it feasible to make this link at the beginning of in the first place?
Yeah, thank you, Najla. It's a marriage between the two. If you look at the SDGs, energy is an enabler across many sectors. Coming from IRENA has the mandate for energy transition across its member states. And if you go to global emissions, we hear so many statistics, but agriculture contributes close to 30% of the carbon emissions, and that is energy driven. And as mentioned in the previous panel, it's unfortunate that this 30% of the food that is produced with these emissions, it goes to waste. It doesn't reach the people. So again, you can attribute this to energy, food handling, quality, and other things. But yes, we need energy to power the agricultural sector. We need energy at farm level. We need energy for cold storage, energy for processing, for productivity. So part of the work that IRENA is doing is supporting member states to integrate energy into agriculture. And for now, we are supporting close to 10 countries where we are looking at energy in the dairy value chain. For example, the farmers in Malawi, they lose close to 40% of their milk produce because there's no efficient cold chains. And for that, we really need energy and energy-efficient equipment to be part of the agricultural value chain. Thank you.
Interesting. But given that you mentioned too many elements throughout the whole process, this moves me to Stephen. Scientifically speaking, given that you are the scientific advisor here in the panel, scientifically speaking, how feasible it is? I mean, where are we heading with the linkage between the renewable energy, food, and agriculture?
Well, thank you for that question, Najla. I'll try to keep it scientific and maybe bring in a few other disciplines, because as you know, in a think tank, we strive to consider things from a 360-degree, is this on? 360-degree perspective, that's better, right? So scientifically, we cannot exclude ever, especially since I'm speaking to a panel of IRENA staffers, the mitigation aspect, in the sense that clean, infinite energy for farm use, not the entire agricultural sector, but I'll focus on the energy use in farms, makes up about 5%, 7% of energy use, which is about of 5 to 7% of the 25 or so % use of agriculture globally. So a small percentage, 1.5%, but 1.2, 1.5%. However, of course, it's always beneficial to mitigation and to adaptation and security, food security to do that. So that's the first observation. But really what I think is more interesting is to look at the practices on farm use of energy, because that's where we get the big efficiencies, the big synergies, the big productivity increases that really go to strengthen food security. The arguments, you've heard many of them before. The circularity, we're beginning to see something which I personally like very much, which is small-scale off-grid biorefineries. It's becoming the technology is becoming more and more diffuse, it's becoming a little bit cheaper, and so we start to see that. It's a critical element in food security and agricultural security. We start to see the greater use of data without going into highly exotic sensors, because our concern is, at least my concern, is the situation of lower income countries and the avoidance of bad supply shocks, which a number of panelists have discussed today, which in economic terms, as you know, creates chaos, not only in the economic sector, but also there's a political element to destabilization and so on. So without going too far into a technological sense of data and so on, it is beneficial. We're starting to see that the use of climate smart agriculture, again based on an intelligent use of data, on the availability of data, and other solutions of that nature. We also start to see what is, to me, perhaps the most interesting thing. It's not technical, it's not scientific, it's strategic, in the sense that renewable energy is a game changer. It changes the playing field, the energy system, the use of energy, which is of course embedded in the entire value chain, across food, across agriculture. Because it's so different, we start to see opportunities to finally, how can I say this diplomatically, to finally move beyond traditional agricultural approaches, which is notoriously difficult with farmers, and across the food value chain, because you've changed something. You've opened new avenues of entrepreneurship, of innovation, due to these great small-scale off-grid solutions that are getting more and more momentum. So that, to me, is equally, if not more important than scientific or technical arguments. You're changing the entire basis of the value chain in the food system, in the agriculture system. In many cases, you're replacing it with renewable sources, and that opens avenues that a narrow technical analysis, a narrow scientific analysis will not show. So I think that is maybe the one of the most important things.
Excellent. A very important point you mentioned, Stephen, that would maybe facilitate my following question to Giedre, is having a strategic thinking for the inclusion of the renewable energy in the whole process is very important. And by saying that we have to work strategically, this means we have to choose also the strategic stakeholders in the whole process. And so given that you coordinate the IRENA Coalition for Action, I mean, having an international network of non-governmental stakeholders is very strategic. So could you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks. I'm really pleased that we came here to discuss renewable energy role in agriculture. I think the previous presentation today about food security painted a very clear picture why we need to transform food systems as they are now. We have nearly 8% of population going hungry every year. We have a massive food wastage, and so within IRENA, I'm coordinating the Coalition for Action, which is a network uniting over 180 stakeholders across private sector, civil society, and research institutions with a mission to accelerate the energy transition, scale up renewable energy. And we actually identified renewables in agriculture as one of our strategic priorities. And what we do now, we are collecting successful case studies, business models in a paper that will have an ambition to encourage other farmers around the world to adopt the learnings and scale this up. So just to mention, building on what my colleagues already said about the benefits, it's obvious that it helps with climate mitigation, but it's also so important, the adaptation and resilience. So farmers who have renewable energy integrated, they can have stable supply for irrigation and for refrigeration, reducing food waste, but they also cut their dependence on fossil fuels, so both for price shocks, but also for supply chain disruptions. It's also not only about environmental benefits, socioeconomic benefits are very important. New jobs for local communities. Farmers can increase the income producing both energy and food on the same piece of land. And here also the double use of land is very important. In many countries, land conflicts are increasingly putting pressure on these decisions. So this more efficient land use is also a very important aspect that can be beneficial for both food and energy security.
Interesting point. Thinking of some other decentralized renewable energy solutions, Wilson, and maybe the off-grid here, what are the risks? There are benefits for sure that we covered so far, but also it's very important to be realistic and looking at the risks and how to overcome these risks.
Okay, no, thank you, Najla. If we look, for example, at the smallholder farmers, there is a myriad of risks and challenges that they face. The biggest being access to finance and access to markets. And also, one of the risks that the sector faces that is trying to solve things in disaggregated portions. If you look at the whole challenge of food security, it's a systemic problem. It's a complex problem. So there is the risk that when you're trying to bring in a lot of energy into the system, you forget that maybe you need other better agricultural practices to accompany it. You need better seeds, you need market linkages, you need many pieces to be connected together for the whole system to work. But there are also challenges of policy defragmentation. But if you go into many of these countries, you will find that the Minister of Agriculture has got a certain agenda that it is pursuing, be it food security and increasing productivity and other things. But what we have observed is that sometimes the connection with the Minister of Energy is not very strong. And even more so sometimes, even with the Minister of Finance, which is doing the budgets. So this brings a global risk of limitations to finance, coordination, loose uptake of technologies. You also get into these countries, you also realize that the supply chain, as with the previous panel, we don't have very strong supply chains to bring in, be it renewable energy equipment or other agricultural processing equipment that needs to work with that energy component. So there is a lot of pieces in this complex problem that needs to be put together for the whole system to kind of work here.
Interesting. To increase the productivity and to put all stakeholders together as well, there are barriers facing government. Within the IRENA's Coalition for Action, what are the main barriers that the international community and all governments are working hand in hand to overcome them?
So there are clear benefits of integrating renewable energy in agriculture. However, there are quite substantial barriers. So namely, it's not only about, we have quite disconnected policy frameworks, agriculture, environment, finance, and energy ministries. They should really collaborate more closer to enable these synergies that we can see. So we advocate for more holistic policy frameworks, water, energy, food, ecosystem nexus approach, and more intersectoral collaboration. But also on the ground level, it's really important to raise awareness. User-centric approach is very important. Understanding the needs and designing training, capacity building for local communities to really take advantage of these opportunities. It's about also local supply chains, so having access to spare parts, maintenance to ensure the viability, long-term sustainability of the project. And what is also really important to mention, of course, as we discussed in previous panels, financing in this aspect is also really important, especially to reach smallholder farmers. So governments have a role to play, providing concessional funding, loans, but also financial institutions. I think we're really lacking this specific model for agrivoltaics, for renewables in agriculture, and also for cooperatives and smallholder farmers, such as own-to-lease models that would help to address the high upfront cost issue. And just a final point, in some contexts, we know that energy production can be more beneficial, more profitable than food production. So as we are engaging in this effort, it's really important to know that we're working on synergies and not trade-offs. So for example, energy production should never compete with food production. We need to ensure community engagement, consultation processes, and also more research and pilot projects to understand how we integrate renewables to increase food production rather than compete with it.
Interesting, and thinking maybe of the point you just mentioned, Giedre, on the having profitable projects and maybe the financial support we need to ensure an increasing inclusion of the renewable energy. So this would maybe make me ask my following question to Stephen. I mean, what financial policies or initiatives we should be taking at both national and international level to ensure that there is more of money injection towards the whole process of including the renewable energy in the food security and agriculture productivity?
I mean, of course, there are significant policy initiatives and actions that can be taken. The thing that scares most economists and people who look at global trends is the price shock. The price shock is more insidious than we think, because a price shock, especially the food sector, the price shock will become embedded very quickly into your economic structure, inflationary trend, and so on. So it's absolutely vital to avoid those kinds of shocks. And of course, the way to do it is resilience of supply chains. This is nothing new, but the policy action and corporate action, company action to maintain the resilience of supply chains, I think, is much better now than it was 5 years ago, and certainly 10 years ago. COVID has been a great teaching experience. The various unfortunate conflicts around the world, and I'm thinking about Ukraine, has also been a very good teaching experience in terms of the agricultural supply chain resilience. But what I think is really important is for entrepreneurship to become more accepted, to become more embedded within the food and agricultural sector. I think it's so critical, and now is the time to do it, because it's a time of transition, it's a time of reinvention, right? So this is very, very critical to act quickly, and not so much there are various policy supports, especially in the UAE for this, all the great hubs, all the great facilitations that are taking place. And I only eat hydroponic produce now. It's so tasty, right, compared to what it used to be in the past. So I think that's very, very important. And I'll just end my remarks on something different, if I may, Najla, which is the humanitarian sector. We often forget. The humanitarian sector is the most vulnerable, the most exposed, of course, the most pays the worst consequences. And coming from the think tank world, we see trends, not necessary to go into them at the moment, but the usual things that you would expect, trends of increasing conflict, and of course climate is a big part in that. It goes into agriculture and everything else, which will more likely than not increase displacement to phenomenal numbers. So I think that the importance of the humanitarian sector, of the resilience of food, the resilience of agriculture, the resilience of energy to the humanitarian sector is something really to pay attention to now, so that in the future there's more preparation. So on that note,
Hopefully. So given that we have to end this session sometime soon, quick question for every single panelist. What are the upcoming opportunities you think of key importance that would maybe give us more of a shortcut to the inclusion of renewable energy in the whole process of food security and agriculture? Starting with you, Wilson.
No, thank you, Najla. I'm not sure it will be that shortcut, but I think we need to engage more in multi-stakeholder platforms that bring governments, private sector, logistics people, the consumers, shops, everyone together to really discuss the topic and work around business models that work on funds flow. Then we also need a lot of capacity building for the farmers themselves, for enterprises in the renewable energy sector, and the other players. I'll pass on to the colleagues.
So multilateral platforms and capacity building. Okay, Giedre. What are the opportunities you see of key importance for, the whole international community, citizens, public companies to focus on in the near future?
So what are the key things?
Yeah.
So the key things, well, it's important to raise awareness, community engagement to understand their needs, have more cross-sectoral collaboration, which we are doing now. We will continue doing more of it in the future at IRENA. Again, just really, I think when we focus on sustainable food systems, it's really important that this definition includes renewable energy, that sustainable food systems must be powered by renewable clean energy.
Interesting. So awareness and crossroad relations. Stephen.
Okay, so I mean, well, some of the things that I should have kept some of those things that I said for this question, right, the last one, but I'll try and add some new ones. I think decentralization is very important.
Again?
Decentralization.
Decentralization.
In particular of energy to remote rural areas. We're seeing some great technologies, some interesting trends in that regard, and it's very important to continue with that and to capitalize on that momentum, to decentralize. So off-grid, just to be clear. I mean off-grid energy. It'll be very beneficial due to a number of reasons. The other one is that we to capture the ability to innovate. What we call a step change in the graph. So not a linear progression, but a step change. Somebody invents something new, and this again is most of the technological advancements in every field have come through inventions, through step changes. So that is another one that I believe will be equally important in this area. And the last, I suppose, is again resilience at a community level, right? To increase the resilience of communities, so farming communities, smallholder communities. That would be my last recommendation, Najla.
Interesting. So decentralization and resilience.
Exactly.
With this, I would like to thank the panelists for being with us today. It was very efficient, I think, and quick to come up with some lessons that the whole audience should be maybe valuing for the near futures and for our collective work for the decades to come. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.